Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at the Jazz Standard for the official New York record release performance, Jeremy Pelt's brand new recording, The Artist. Now, the span of 20 years, Jeremy Pelt has been a very important stalwart in the jazz community, both here and abroad. In fact, this gentleman has also extended himself from the band stage to the classroom. As you might know, Jeremy has recorded as well as performed with the likes of the great Louis Hayes, the great Roy Hargrove, and the Vanguard Big Band, just to name the endless few. Tonight he's performing brand new music from his brand new album, The Artist, and I had a chance to sit down to break bread with him to talk about this brand new recording, how art inspired him to write some of the compositions in the suite for this recording, as well as sit down and talk about and reflect on the life of Roy Hargrove. So sit back, relax, and enjoy highlights of the official New York record release performance of Jeremy Pelt performing brand new music from his new album, The Artist, here at the Jazz Standard, as part of the Pace Report here in New York City. You know, it's been a minute since we broke bread. Congratulations on this brand new record, The Artist.
Well, thank you, man. Thanks a lot, man. And it has been a minute since we've seen each other.
You know, Jeremy, this new record, from what I've done my research on, you were inspired by art to write 5 pieces of music on this record.
That's correct. It's inspired by Auguste Rodin, It's one of my favorite museums to go to in Paris. Is the Musée Rodin, and I've been going. I go to Paris maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and every time I'm there, I go to that museum, and it's a beautiful. I like the way it's situated with a lot of the sculptures in the garden and whatnot. So it's also very picturesque, and so that lends something to it. But I mean, just the motion in his works, and you know, it's just very beautiful to see, and it left quite an indelible impression on me.
Writing the music for this, how long did it take you, and what were you thinking about musically? Because I've noticed this band is killer that you got here.
Thank you. Um, Writing the music maybe took cumulatively it might have taken a month or so. It wasn't too deep in terms of taking months and months to put together. I started very small. Sometimes I was composing while I was actually at the museum, and I was putting together different little vignettes in my book, and then I'd go back to where I was staying and flesh it out. You know, and then after I fleshed it out, then I when I came back to the states, I'd compose some more. So I mean, like I said, about a month to put everything together.
I noticed this band very organic. You added some percussion, you added vibes. There's even some electronic
Mm.
in here too. Explain the musical elements behind this.
I had it in my mind to write a larger ensemble piece, and I just pretty much kind of added to the texture that I had in my previous band. So my previous band had the percussion in it, and so I definitely thought to keep the percussion. But then I was like, well, then on top of that, let me add vibraphone. So it was almost like a reunion of everything that I'd used before in one band or another, and put them all together. Because I've used vibraphone before in other bands earlier on. Definitely have used the electronics. So I mean, none of this was brand new to me, but it was just rather putting everything together that was the difference.
Even the titles of the compositions into the suite, I just think they're kind of interesting. Gates of Hell.
Well, that was the name of his one of his sculptures. It was something that he was commissioned to write, which is interesting when you think about it, because I was commissioned to write this suite. So that was something that he was commissioned to write, and he took that uh, his inspiration from the Divine Comedy, from Dante's Divine Comedy, and more specifically, he took it from the Inferno, Dante's Inferno, and about the 9 rings of hell and whatnot. And so, and when you look at that piece, it's very visually striking. So when you see it, it's like, wow, okay, I can see where this is coming from. So the challenge, that was actually the most challenging piece to write out of everything, was just trying to capture that, because there were so many different ways that you can go. So the hard part for me was isolating one way that I wanted to make it.
Who commissioned you to write the music for this?
Certainly, it was commissioned by Font. Font is Festival of New Trumpet, Festival of New Trumpet Music, rather, and it was an organization started by Dave Douglas and Roy Campbell Jr. And I've been part of that organization for ever since its really inception, being on the board and whatnot, and curating a lot of festivals, spots in the festival. And the festival usually takes place in September.
I want to jump ship here because there was a project that you were a part of last year that I so wanted to do. It was the Armor of Pride, the
Black Art
Art
Jazz.
Jazz
Yeah,
Collective,
yeah.
and I wanted to ask you how that came about and just the music and the compositions on that record are just smoking.
Well, that band came about a few years ago. That was probably in 2012 or 2013, I believe. And that was really the brainchild of Wayne Escoffery, a tenor saxophone player. And he had it in his mind that he wanted to create a band that celebrated black artistry, um, unabashedly, just with no shame at all. Because a lot of times we tiptoe around things, and we wanted to really just put it out there that we're, a black band that's celebrating, the black greatness. And he got myself involved, and he got Jonathan Blake involved, and we became the nucleus of that. And we said, all right, well, who should we get on trombone? Who should we get on bass? Whatnot. So we founded that band, and the idea was always that we were going to write music, and at first, kind of dedicated to black figures, cultural figures, but then also just really just come out with an output of music that is reflective of who we are and the times that we live in.
You think that jazz musicians and music as a whole, whether it's hip hop, whether it's R&B or rock, because back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the arts movement was connected to the music and the music was connected to the
Mhm.
art. Do you think that right now jazz is speaking to a lot of the issues and the pearls that are going on in the world right now?
I think so. I definitely think so. I mean, in one way or another, I think there's a lot of what is written. There are a lot of people that are getting ink for doing various projects, but for all those that are getting ink, for every one person, there's 10 other people that are doing something that's just important, but they don't necessarily get the shine on them. But it's always, I think it's always been culturally relevant and addressing a lot of the concerns that are happening.
Jeremy, the whole evolution of the music has really been about struggle. When I look at the beginning of jazz music or hip hop or even punk, a lot of the music that came out of these genres came out of a struggle. And it seems like now moving forward, it seems like guys like you have really continued to carry the baton on and carrying it on for the next generation.
Certainly. Well, I mean, it's a part of just my fabric, my being, um, to do so. I mean, it's like once you get so deep in it, you can't get out of it. And it's not that I even want to get out of it. It's just that it's me now. You know what I mean? So it's not even life imitating art or art imitating life. It's just we're in this together. And so it's really important for me to keep going and moving forward. And it's also important for me to include other younger people and get them involved and getting the message out and really teaching them what I've learned through people that I've been fortunate enough to play with, uh, most of which are no longer with us.
Yeah, speaking of which, because we lost a very important musical figure late last year, Roy Hargrove, and you played in his big band.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to ask you now, looking back and reflecting on Roy's musical palette, because he was so heavy, what are some of the things that he left on you as a musician and as a composer and as a person?
I think one of the things that was very important that really created a big impression on me was his humility in terms of being around other masters. Um, he always deferred to them. He was always very respectful, and in turn, they loved Roy. And I know this because I would play with them, obviously, some years after he did, and I've seen the kind of vibe that they have towards Roy, and that was always a beautiful thing. Now, and you see, I was the type of person. I was somebody that grew up on the couch next to my grandfather, or it was always some old. I was the youngest person always, right? So there was always old people around to tell stories and pass down anecdotes, and so I benefited from all that. So the way that I came up with was very old school. So I already have a very old soul as it is, because that's how I digested it, and so because of that, I've developed a very strong reverence for my elders, and and because of that reverence, I always wanted to please them and get their acceptance, because that meant more to me than anything. And I've gotten accolades, at this point in my life, and I'm appreciative of all of them. But the bigger things to me are the acceptance of my elders, and them even talking to me. You know what I mean? That's heavy on me, and that's something that Roy had, and I noticed that from when I was 16. I mean, Roy's only he was only 6 years older than me, but that was something that I always noticed about him and wanted for myself, and that was something that was very important that he left behind, um, and also his just generosity of wanting to spread the word. I mean, it's it. One, I don't know. You can't really say that he had a premonition that he was going to die. Whatever, or well, not die, but I mean, dying early. But he always had this sense of urgency, even though he was generally a laid back person. But he really was involved in uh, a very big way with trying to get to younger musicians and really teach the value of learning this music. Because me and Roy, we used to hang out earlier, in earlier years, man. We were very cool, and so I know what was in his heart, and I knew, he was always creative, and he could do anything, and he was, at the forefront of a neo soul movement. He was doing all of that, and that caught the eyes and the ears of a new generation, and it's none more apparent now than when I start to teach my students who are maybe 19 or 20 years old now, and in that time 19, 20 years, even more, he was really out here, just playing pure bebop all the time. And they don't even really know about that side of him, even though he was at Smalls up until, a couple of days before he died, playing it. You know what I mean? But so I say that to say that although he had all of those coins, he had all that at his fingertips, playing the neo soul and doing these horn lines and really inspiring a whole new generation. He would have told you himself that he's just a bebopper, which is funny because that's what Freddie Hubbard used to tell me. Yeah, I'm just a bebop. You know what I mean? I mean, and look, we all know how Freddie's career went. He went to started doing rock and all that, and but he would tell you in a minute. I'll do 16 bars here or whatnot, but really, I'm a bebopper, and that's where his heart was, and that was very important to him.
I've noticed, your band stage, you have a myriad of young and old on the stage. And being a band leader now, what are you instilling upon the musicians who are really trying to cut their teeth in the New York jazz scene and abroad? Because you just took this band overseas.
Right. Work ethic. Work ethic is the number one thing. They see the work. This tour was a successful tour. It was one of my favorite tours that I've done in the whole, time that I've been on the road. But this was also grueling at times, particularly one of the weeks because we were in Poland and we would play one day and then get on a train, which people, oh, the train is great, the Amtrak, and they would clean trains and whatnot. But I mean, just waking up to know that you had to get on a train and you're riding for between 6 and 8 hours to the next town, and you get to the next town, you always had to, so it was grueling in that sense, but they really put in the work, and they showed up and they played their asses off every night, 100%. There wasn't any kind of, oh man, I'm tired, I don't know if I could do this, which is and it's hard to pull that off. You know what I mean? Because we're playing the same exact music every night, and that's something that it can't. And what's different about it is that you could hear whoever, Train or Miles or all these bands play their same music every night, but it evolves into something differently. Sometimes they might not even play a melody at all. But this isn't like that. This is something that's very composed, and it depends on you playing it exactly as I wrote it. The improvisation's all your own, but what I wrote has to be there. And so for you to psych yourself out to do that day after day after an 8-hour trip is something special. You know what I mean? Even for me, I mean, just because I wrote it doesn't mean I don't get tired of playing it. So it's what I'm saying is that they really put in the work, and they showed up and really added something to it. So the work ethic is what I kind of bring to the table, and they see that. And I always came up under the understanding that you had to be a strong band leader. When you're a strong band leader, then you affect the whole band. In other words, the band is only as strong as its leader.
There's no I and we.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So I have to be there, or else everything can go down the way of the dodo bird.
Let's go back. I want to piggyback on something you said just a few minutes ago about the elders. And, Dr. Eddie Henderson has been really a stalwart, but also at the same time, he really embraced a lot of young guys. And I know that he's been a very important and effective mentor to you. What is it about Dr. Henderson that, again, because when I look at him back at his music, his whole music trajectory was just really, he's been all over the place, but he's still, his heart is still in the straight ahead.
And I'm trying to understand your question. So you're saying, what is it about him that?
That about his music and also his knowledge of the music that he's imparted on you, because he's got a lot of knowledge.
Sure. Well, he's been around and he's played all. Eddie was somebody that his playing is open ended, and that's something that I always dug about where his approach was that there was never a final ending to something like, okay, this is how it's going to be. There was always like, it could go this way or it could go that way. Which way am I going to go? And that's how he's always been. He's somebody that still amazes me as he gets closer to 80, being able to still be completely precise in his phrasing and in his sound. And I've learned a lot just by watching him play and listening to him and seeing how he gets certain sounds, and certain sound qualities of his horn. And that's always been something. And it's funny too, you know why? Because I remember a conversation I had with Roy years ago. We were talking about how great Eddie was, and we were talking about, yeah, and he's playing this because at that point Eddie was changing horns all the time. He's playing Martin. Well, no, he was playing Selma, and Roy was like, "What? You know what? That's Eddie. That ain't the horn." No. And that's true. I mean, whatever. He can play a tomato can. He's still gonna sound great. So that's something that's very great about Eddie, and just being around him and hearing anecdote after anecdote about the people that we meaning my generation have revered for so long, and perhaps he himself have revered too, but the only difference is he's been around them, Miles and Lee Morgan and everybody like that. So I look to him to for different insight, and he never disappoints.
The band stage is where you got all of your training, and you in the classroom now. Now that a lot of our elder statesmen are leaving us now, unfortunately, what do you think the next generation of musicians are going to have to do in order to capture what you and guys like Roy Hargrove got on the band stage?
I don't think they can capture it, and here's what I mean by that. I think that if you're of the mind, to do that and be serious and effective in doing that, you could capture it to a certain degree. But I think what's happening right now in the younger generation is that they are trying to discover what it is about themselves now, musically, that they're going to take into their own futures. And in a sense, they're dictating the future on their own terms. And here's the thing: even when I was coming up, Art Blakey was dead. Betty Carter, she died a couple years after I moved in town. Also, all these known kind of incubators had gone, so you don't have that anymore. So when I talk to people that are maybe 10 years older than me, max 15 years older than me, they'll sit over there and they'll tell me stories about, oh man, Art would be here at McKell's or he'd be over at Sweet Basil, and everybody would be a line of people to sit in with him and this and that, and Art did this and Art did that, or Betty, she would do this on the stage if you did this wrong. There was all these lessons that are learned that have I get secondhand from people that have played with them, or else I get from sources that I played with, like Jimmy Heath and Lewis Hayes and Cedar Walton and all these different people, and so it's great to learn it like that. But these people aren't going to be around forever. So now it does fall on me. It did fall on Roy, and like I said, Roy was great at doing that. But I feel like this generation is some generation that is almost tired of hearing uh, about constantly about the past, and that's disheartening. But there's also a truth factor to it. I mean, it's like when I was coming up, be like, "Oh man, shit, you should have heard Charlie Parker." Well, okay, look, I give up. Right? Charlie Parker died 20 years before I was born. So can we talk about something else? I mean, I'm going to listen to him, but they're really concerned with what's happening now, and so that's why there are lots of offspring of jazzy type of things, and then they're starting to go into some different areas right now to really define the music in today's terms, that they could cling to, which is not necessarily a bad thing because that's how things get shaken up. I do think that there's still a big vitality in straight ahead and learning the tradition of the music and having that be a catalyst for bringing you into something else. But what happens right now, especially as you said, I'm in the classroom right now, is that there's much less patience to learn it. You know what I mean? Because there's a difference between learning it in the classroom and Jimmy Heath calling me on the phone and say, "You want to do this jazz mobile with me?" Yeah, okay, I'm playing with Jimmy Heath now. Some sense tells me I'm playing with Jimmy Heath. I better start learning, his songs. And he loves Bird. They used to call him Little Bird, so I'm learning Confirmation. I'm learning Hot House. I'm learning this and that. I used to go over to Jimmy's house and just learn Hot House with him, so I could play this with him as accurately as he was playing it with Fats Navarro and cats back in the '40s. So that was my learning. Cats don't have that right now. They don't have that kind of patience because, as they perceive it, they're not playing it with a Jimmy Heath. They're going to play it with me, and at that point, they're starting to think, well, I mean, so what if I missed one note? That one note is very important, but they're not going to get it. You see? So, there's things to be happy about. There's things to lament about, but I think overall the music is moving forward, and everybody's got their own story to tell.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report, reporting live here at the Jazz Standard for the official New York record release performance for Jeremy Pelt's brand new recording, The Artist, which is now available on High Note Records. I'd like to personally thank Jeremy for his time. Make sure you go out and support his brand new record, which is now available on iTunes as well as Amazon.com and High Note Records website. For more information for Jeremy's upcoming club dates, please visit him online at jeremypelt.com. I'd like to personally thank the staff and management here at the Jazz Standard for their warm hospitality. As always, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave comments to my videos both here on Vimeo and YouTube, as well as visit my website, thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.